Pico, California is California's largest faith-based organizing network, community organizing network, with 9 community affiliate organizations all across California, organizing in faith institutions, in schools, and in congregations, people of faith and spirit, for a society, for a state where we can all thrive and belong. And so what we aspire to do is, for all Californians of faith who share these values, Pico aspires to be both a political and a spiritual home. This is also an opportunity to listen, to regroup and rethink, to think about how we move together and how can spirit and faith bind us across difference.
Moving forward, we really need to begin in that place and really discovering and creating and discerning those values. What are the yearnings, the fears, the hopes, and the dreams of our peoples that ground the values of our organizing and embody the spiritual and democratic ethos that is fueled by those hopes, by those dreams, by those values, of our peoples and of our communities. Our spiritual traditions, the rituals, the meditations, the prayers, the messages, the sacred texts, the sacred stories, they provide tools and resources to help us give language and practice to express and organize around. For instance, in our tradition, what we really pushed this past cycle, those of us who come from the Protestant Christian tradition, Mark 10:45 says, for the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but rather to serve and to give his life to liberate many people. So we really try to frame it in a way such that as we discern policies and we discern our votes, what are votes that liberate in community, not just serve individual interests? What does it look like? What does liberation look like? What does that feel like? What does that smell like? What is it to be free? And wrestle what that means from different perspectives as we organize as a community and creating that sacred space, curating that sacred space. It's important not to do so under public surveillance.
Just reflecting on your call for deeper listening, deeper reflection, and the transformative power that faith traditions and faith institutions can bring to an election, which is on the surface, the master's tools, right? And how can faith traditions make it something more transformative? And how can we think about it in a liberatory way?
Like, one of the foundational beliefs in our faith is solidarity, not just amongst Muslims, but solidarity with all oppressed people. And so Muslim Americans who are deeply politically engaged, many of us pledged to get out the vote. We voted in the election with our conscience. And in thinking about radical hope, right? Muslims were taught as a tradition of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so peace be upon him, that even if we hear the sound of the day of judgment, if it's upon us, that if we have a sapling in our hand, we still plant this. So that really is like foundational to how we do things, right? And our actions are but by intention. So many of us voted by our intentions. We don't own the outcomes of things, but what we do own is by that intention. And so for Muslims, one of our most sacred forms, like the most sacred struggle, and so this term jihad, which means a sacred struggle, which is like that purification of our soul, is speaking truth to power, speaking truth to an oppressor. So as we're moving forward with a lot of Muslim Americans, as they're thinking about organizing, what rounds our work in organizing and showing up as standing firm for justice. So this comes from the Quran and the verse, the chapter of the women, verse 135, stand firm for justice as witnesses for Allah, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, or close witnesses. Be they rich or poor, Allah is the best to ensure their interests. So do not let your desires cause you to deviate from justice. So going forward, as we're thinking about building power, as we're thinking about our shared interests and collective liberation, it is looking at whether our own kinfolk or are we oppressors, and how can we uproot that within ourselves. So I am really excited about the next stage. I mean, yes, there's a lot of fear, but there's a lot of hope, and that we can really get down to brass tacks to really center and protecting our rights and encountering hate and prioritizing protecting our most vulnerable, including the refugees, asylum seekers, our young people, and our sick and the unhoused.
Important. I don't know if reminder is the right word, but I think to be centered and very sober about what we are facing and what is coming in the next few years.
But our biggest asset for us is leadership development. We feel that we're going to take that lead in leadership development. The prophet, our thing is a prophetic narrative organizing model. And that means for us is that we really need to cultivate resilience. We have to develop that inner strength in critical thinking and for deep feeling and for empathy. These are all these pieces we have to do. So it's not just about policy stuff and agitation, but it's about getting people to really go to that deeper place. So we need leaders who are able to be courageous and move forward with their neighbors. And as organizers, we're learning how to help people connect to their inner power and their faith. So we're doing a lot of inner spiritual work, understanding how that works. And through deep listening, we want to create spaces for people to own narratives, their own narrative of liberation, but also how do you share that narrative with others to build up a more resilient community? So we're working in an environment of post-COVID pain, and we know that people are still struggling with trauma and getting back on their feet. So that's why we know that this inner work is super, super important. It's leading us to integrate more explicitly the spiritual dimensions in all aspects of our work as organizers. And we know already that it's not just about political intelligence, but we have to also include this inner work that has to be done. So that's kind of where we see the formation, spiritual formation is going to be really key for us moving forward to build strong, resilient communities.
Thank you, Father John. Yeah, it's just incredibly moving to hear directly from folks what they're experiencing. And it did strike me, all of those things were there before November and they're there after November.
It's worse.
It's worse, yes. And so striking when we think about not just building our political power, but also building our inner strength and our spiritual power.
So I think in many ways, that is our role as faith leaders. That is our role as people of some sensibility, as people of prophecy, as a state of California, to remind the world that the world is going absolutely crazy, and reminding the world that whether it's the climate crisis or the immigration deportations that may or may not start, or poverty or homelessness or unaffordability of housing or racism or sexism or homophobia or the list goes on and on. We need to be the prophetic voices that come forth. And the prophets, certainly from my Jewish tradition, the prophets came forth when the shit hit the fan. That's when they started speaking up, when things got bad. But we don't have to get angry. We don't have to get reactive. We need to get wise and compassionate and act from something deeper than reactivity and anger. So may we each rise up in our own prophetic voice and speak truth to power.
Even just to say that out loud, like the world is going pretty nuts, I think is a powerful truth that we don't often hear enough in the halls of power, in the room with the titles and the suits, etc.
Different times. And one of the things I always really admired about our spiritual ceremonies and our tribal customs was we always needed the other tribes surrounding us to come together and support us during our spiritual time. And I always liked, it didn't make sense to me when I first heard it, but now I really appreciate that the village that was hosting the intertribal villages that were coming together, the people that lived in those split cedar or split redwood houses built into the earth, they would move out of the comfort of their home so that they weren't better than anyone else. They camped with everyone else that was coming to visit and support. And I guess as I think about hope, and as the fact that my oldest grandson turns 21 years old today, I think all of us have to worry about ourselves and our friends and our families, and those lives keep on going no matter who's in the Oval Office. But it makes me sharper, makes me. It's a quieter, more serious fight in 2024 and beyond than it was in 2016. And just me getting to that place, that gives me hope, because I have too much work to do, too many people to think about to not get to that healing place.
This is the first time I'm hearing you talk about public tears. I think that's resonating in a really powerful way as well. I want to invite our speakers into a round robin to share any closing reflections, and also to also reflect from your own faith and wisdom traditions. What can those traditions offer us in terms of survival, of hope, of processing, of action in this sort of quieter, more serious time that.
I think really, I mean, in our liturgical seasons. And so our liturgical season is a season of Advent right now, where we're preparing to celebrate the arrival of the Christ. And one of the things that we've been emphasizing over this season is, with all the joy and all the celebration and all that we come into, it's really a prophetic stance of responding to a world that seems to be spiraling and falling apart. And so it's a season of building resilience, seeking the sacred, seeking the power in our lives in community, to really craft a sense of hope and a promise in the midst of what it seems to be decay in the world. And so it's really in that place, I think, with the differences of perspective and opinion, even within that community, all of us can agree we're in that shared space. And it's from that shared space that our sacred traditions can give us a sense of how we can still come together and organize and build and strive. And so the commercialization of the season can lead us to go away from that. But going deep into our roots, we can discover a power to resist it, and can be a part of the transformation of our families, our communities, the state, the nation, the world. And so it's a season just to be invited to go deep into who we are individually and deep into who we are in community and our heritage, and to discover that power for the resilience for the work ahead.
Thank you so much, Pastor. Margari, closing thoughts.
Yeah, well, the 2016, it had definitely some devastating impact on our community with the African Muslim ban. And over the past year has been one of the most difficult and traumatic times for our community, as we've seen children shredded, TV, it's just been so impactful. But I'm reminded of the verse, 2 verses from the Quran, Inna usri yusra, Inna usri yusra, which is, with every difficulty there's ease. And it's repeated twice: with every difficulty comes ease. So even in the difficulty times, in this difficult times, while we are really trying to save lives and hold our loved ones, right, accountable, who are condoning, right, and acting that is the most active, radical love of, when we stop the people that we love from oppressing. And so my hope during this time is that we break out of that binary, and that the role that we have is through storytelling and deep radical love, is holding each other close so that we can win over the hearts of those, as opposed to keeping that permanent adversarial binary, but really doing this work and connecting and building with you all with love.
Thank you so much, Margari. And I'm reminded by our wonderful interpreter, Heidi, to continue to just be mindful of simultaneous interpretation and speak at a slower cadence. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Father John, for closing thoughts and also thoughts from your various faith traditions and wisdom traditions about how we can fortify and maybe make ourselves more vulnerable in this time.
I'm also in a liturgical tradition, so it is Advent and it is a season of hope. But it's a hope that's an active hope, and hope is a decision. And so for me, as a Catholic, on the progressive side of it, I look to like Mary as a really big figure, and John the Baptist is a big figure for us in the liturgical seasons and the daily readings and the prayers of the office. It just speaks about just being, put your faith out there, just really have a real change. I mean, this whole idea of going out in the middle of the Jordan, having a big mikvah, a big rededication of your life and turning away from the empire. I just think that's really a total badass way to look at Advent. I mean, that's just really what it's about. I am turning away from the empire and I'm going into the Jordan. I'm going to have this rededication, cleansing, mikvah. I'm going to leave out of that and I'm ready to receive spirit to do some work that has to be done. So it's that to me is active. And then when I think of, Mary's word in Luke, which is, just kind of echoing what the song of Susanna, or the song of Hannah of, turning the rich away, upsetting, turning things around. So it's just this real kind of North Star vision of what can be done and what should be done. So I just think that Advent has the readings and the prayers and the lighting candles as the dark still encroaches. You're still lighting candles, and you light more candles as it gets more dark. You light more damn candles as it gets even more dark. It's like you insist on being light when there's nothing but darkness around you. I think these are the symbols that inspire me in this season, and I just think if we're touched inside by that, whatever our faith tradition it happens to be, my thought is that once that internal change happens, everything else starts to fall in place. So that's kind of where I kind of feel and hope that my faith tradition helps that. I kind of see that as something, and working with other faith traditions and seeing where that resonates with them is good.
Insisting on being that light in the darkness. Thank you, Father.
Yes. Yep. Light a candle, no matter how dark it gets. Keep on lighting those damn candles.
And I think candles are something that many faith traditions share across tradition, many of our ancestral traditions as well. Rabbi Seth, closing thoughts, reflecting on the conversation today, and then just lessons or other stories from your various wisdom traditions on how to move forward in this time.
Very much appreciate the conversation and the wisdom from my colleagues. The teaching that comes to mind is actually from St. Francis de Sales, a Catholic who said what's needed, and that's something I use a lot in my work with returning citizens coming out of incarceration, but I think it's relevant for us in dealing with the political climate as it is. What's needed is a cup of understanding, a barrel of love, and an ocean of patience. So that while we may want to understand everything and figure it all out, it only requires a little bit of understanding, but it requires a lot of love and a huge amount of patience.
Thank you, Rabbi Seth. And Terry, we'll give you the last word as you sort of started us off on this conversation around hope, and you added survival to it as well. But what are your final thoughts as we close out tonight's conversation?
B, it's a terrific question, and you reminded me of the statement of public love. And I want to close out. Not all of us have the opportunity that I've been given, but I'll tell you a quick little story. But this past week, a long time member of the Pico network, in shame, came to me and said that that this mother, she said she was surprised, but she didn't know until recently that her son had voted for Donald Trump. And over the years, I've been invited into this family. I just love this large, extended Latino family, and all of them, the kids, the elders, everyone in between. And I love the children. I love the adult children that I've grown to know. I thought about it, and I went back to her later and I said, "Would you mind if I reached out to your son, and not to confront him, not to challenge him, but in that spirit of curiosity, in that spirit of public love, wanting to remain curious and open and try to understand and not point fingers, but really try to clothe myself in really deep curiosity, because I do love this young man. I've always been really drawn to and attracted, and as a single dad raising teenage boys, working hard, there's just so much to love there that I don't want to just be angry. Ask those questions and meet in solidarity and community. And I want to win like hell. I want to win again later. And I think the only way we get there is by having the strength for me to love more than I hate.
And one of the special powers that I think our panel of speakers shared tonight is that people of spirit, people of faith can ground us in our core values and remind us that we will not be divided and that we will be able to face these times centering spirit and love and power, not just political power, but spiritual power in our communities as well, as we accompany communities in this time.